All right, now we're done with step 8. So we're moving right along into step 9, which is to make connection. So during this project, we'll be making connections between sides secure by tinning wires and pads before soldering them together. So we're going to tin all of the wires, and we'll go through and we'll tin the pads. The purpose of that is we'll have solder on here, and we'll have solder on here. So whenever we're doing our project, we're not having to try to hold a wire to the board and solder and a soldering iron. We'll just be able to put the wire on the pad where it goes, and then we can just put the iron on top of both, and they'll fuse together, making our process a lot simpler and a little less complicated. A little more work on the front end, but it's a lot simpler when we get going. So it's recommended to use a soldering pot. We don't have soldering pots for this. We're going to go through and tin all the wires. If you had helping hands, which are little almost like alligator clips that can hold your wire, that would be helpful. But since we don't, I'm going to show you all what I do. And it's fairly simple. So we've got our soldering iron stand, and I've got my soldering iron in it. You can't really see it from this angle. Okay, so I've got my soldering iron stand. Soldering iron is in it. Soldering iron is on. So it is heated. I have tinned my iron, and I'm going to take the wire, and I can do this a couple ways. I can either tin the tip really good, and then I can get the wire on there until it heats up and starts to accept that solder. Kind of move it back and forth. It takes it a little bit longer, and your wire is going to get a little bit warmer. So you want to be careful with that. But you can you'll be able to see the solder covering the strands. The other method is we're going to make sure that all the strands are together. So we're going to twist the strands together, and then we'll put the wire on our soldering iron and bring some solder to it, and just move it back and forth. Move the wire back and forth in between the solder and the soldering iron, so that solder gets on there. Okay. We are going to tin both sides of our 2.5, 3-inch, and 3 1/4 wires, both red and white. We'll tin both sides. And on our 5-inch, we're only going to tin one side. So this is another one of those 2.5-inch red wires. So I'm going to tin both sides. I'm putting the wire onto the iron and then adding some solder, letting that soak in there. You can kind of see the solder moving on my camera. And you'll be able to see when you look in there, you'll see a silver covering over your wires, and you'll know that it's soldered. And so whenever we take this soldered wire, stick it on our board, and add heat to it from the soldering iron, that'll help the wire fuse to the pad. If you don't have a stand set up like this, you might have to get creative. Maybe if you're in class, maybe have the person next to you help you tin those. Maybe get creative with making something to hold the wire for you. Or it might be that you can rig up some way for the iron to set on the pad to where this portion, the metal portion, is not touching the pad. It's sitting up, so you might have it propped up somehow like that maybe. But you got to be careful that you don't bump it, knock it over, and that you don't put your hand on it because you don't want to burn yourself. So if you're doing it at home, you might have to get resourceful, ask a parent for help or a sibling. And then going back, now I've got the 5-inch red wire, and we are only going to tin one side of the 5-inch wire. Okay, so just one side of that, both sides of all the others. Same thing with the white, one side of the 5-inch white wires, both sides of your 3-inch and 3 1/4 inch. And then once you are done with that, we will be through step 12 and ready for step 13.